All right, Wholeness, my lovely, beautiful people. This is the Need to Know Crosstalk show. Yes, I am your host, Zeke Dorset, and I have an amazing, wonderful friend. Absolutely, love to see this guy one day soon if time treats me well. We have gentleman Jeff McKay here. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, doing so well. Yeah, so nice to be here. Finally get on the show and to connect. It's sometimes I get scared of the technology, but this is one beautiful thing. We're, connecting here from across the ocean.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. You're saying it's snowing your end, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, we had a very fast spring. It was very warm and it looked like we were, over and done with the winter. But we're in the mountains here in Calgary. The weather's very unpredictable. And then we had a big old snowstorm, and it's we're right around freezing right now, right around zero. I think
Wow.
you guys do Celsius, eh? I think it's only the weirdos in the States that are using the Fahrenheit. It's we've got mutual friends there like Bobby, and I'm always converting to Fahrenheit, so it's nice. I can just be real. Yeah, it's weird. Like freezing in Fahrenheit is like 22 degrees or something. It doesn't even make any sense. But yeah, we're right around freezing, and which is a good thing. We need the snow, we need the moisture, and we're just getting ready to start growing. As you can see, the growing lights behind me there.
Yes, I'm really super excited to delve into our topic today. Now, the topic for you guys we're going to be covering today, and anything else that pops into our heads, because Jeff is very, very knowledgeable, even for the short space of time that he's been involved in what we're going to be talking about today, being fermentation, permaculture. We'll be talking a little bit more on the synergy with nature and the self. What is food? And anything else that we want to touch base on as well. And I mean, they're quite broad areas. We were just, before we recorded, there was so much to talk about. Like, just so much incredible information that, needs to be told on a much more grander scale. Like, I've touched base and dipped my toes into certain parts of these areas and fermentation, stuff like that, but I don't hear it too much. So that being said, first question that I'm going to jump into for you, my friend, is I think we'll touch base with permaculture, because I'd like to know a little bit more about fermentation after. But what's your take on permaculture, my friend?
Oh, so important. First and foremost, I think it's something everyone just, you don't need to become an expert on it. It doesn't need to be your life calling, but just to grasp it, just in the same way that, grasping the difference between organic and inorganic food. Permaculture plays an important role because it's the idea that, you're growing foods that grow in your area. You have a garden where you don't really need to water it or tend to the weeds. The weeds that grow in your garden, you also eat those. It's going back to how things used to be. And I know when I started planting, just getting into growing food, it was about 4 years ago. Right. And I mean, I went at it the opposite way, tomatoes and all these things you need a greenhouse for, and things that just don't even make sense to grow here. And there's one hailstorm and half your food's gone. And I'm like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Yet, I can see it right from here. There's a tree in my neighbor's yard, an apple tree, and it's so abundant every year. And, my tomatoes, that's kind of, Western agriculture, if we want to call it that. And then to my left, the apples here, that's permaculture. Every year that tree will be so abundant. We don't have to water it. We don't have to do much. We maybe prune it every couple years. And I'm not, permaculture really depends on the area you live in, what stuff you need to grow, fixing the soil, and, and an excellent book for people. It's not really on permaculture, but it's the One Straw Revolution.
Show that again for us.
It might be backwards, I would imagine.
It's right. Yeah. It's around the one Straw Revolution.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful book. Yeah, absolutely unreal. Half of it's about farming in Japan, and there's a ton of wisdom. This is a great book to have in your bathroom, just to flip through once in a while, and just a very wise old man. And he was in Japan, he's Japanese, and he noticed how they were growing rice. You know, it used to be there was the traditional method, which was about 100 years old when he was, this is in the 50s, so be about, 150 years old now. And this involved a lot of water and a ton of work. And then eventually came in chemical agriculture, and everyone swapped over because it was so much easier. But he really sat back. He was an environmental scientist, and he was seeing how ridiculous it was, like how much work they were doing, and the fields were just so depleted. Like they just, if you didn't pump them full of nutrients, nothing would grow. If a new pest came up, it would devastate so much of it. He just seen something that was so out of balance. And one day he was walking, and he noticed in a deserted field, a field that had been abandoned for a few years, so no human intervention, and there was some rice stalks sprouting. Something that he had been told was impossible. Rice doesn't just grow, it needs all this work and so on. So in this book, he goes through he calls it do nothing farming, and it's, some stuff gets lost in translation, Japanese to English. So by do nothing, he doesn't mean there's no work involved, but there's, like when he harvests his rice, he's taking the grain and everything else of the plant stays behind. Instead of picking weeds, he grows a specific ground cover, so like a grass, but he grows clover, which we know now fixes nitrogen to the soil, extremely important.
Okay.
It's like a natural fertilizer, and the clover is very resilient, so when it sprouts up, no weeds come up that you don't want. It's just the clover grows to a nice height, and when you cut it, it fertilizes the ground. And to me, that's permaculture, this idea where you're just like a caretaker for nature. You trim some stuff, you maybe plant some stuff here and there, but you're not bulldozing, dumping tons of different stuff, inviting, all these different chemicals. And Rudolf Steiner, another excellent, I don't even know what to call Rudolf Steiner, if you call him he just wrote so many books on occult science to different farming techniques. But, he was big into, if you have a successful farm, and he admits you don't just start this way, but the end goal is everything should come from your farm. Every bit of fertilizer used, everything should be your own waste or waste from your animals. Yeah. And to me, in a nutshell, that's permaculture. Yeah. Having your land, and everything can come from that land. You don't need much intervention.
Totally, yeah. I'm 100%. That makes so much sense. I'm nowhere near on the level of what permaculture stands for, and it's such a shame to say that, to be honest. Well, what you just said then, that the whole idea of being able to recycle everything, because I've got, it just makes perfect sense in my head that there's no need to waste anything if you really understand what everything accounts to, what everything is worth, and everything has. Yeah. In a sense.
Oh, such a good word to use, the worth. If you understand what stuff is worth and what it's worth too, like who would pay money for it, as an example, but right. It's not someone, it's say, I know this plant will use that waste like I would use gold, Yeah. So that's such a good word to use, the worth. And, it's many of us, so many people, I've always said, not many people are into this stuff. And I'm not down for changing the world through laws and politicians. However, for argument's sake, one law that would change the world is, everyone starting tomorrow, a square percentage of your apartment or your backyard has to be for growing food. The things we would start to learn.
We should be taught this. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. This is something that, we should be taught from a young age. From a very, without veering off too far, if that was the situation and we were taught at a young age, I have quite a positive feeling that the world would be looked upon very differently. as in
unbelievably,
thinking in a completely different, in a more logical manner, thinking, hang on, something's not right here. And, you know,
good.
Based on GMO or depleted soil, or just or being a glorified microwave technician, which is what I like. You know, something that is, we have all these middlemen in a sense, and there's there's complete lack of awareness and an understanding of how to actually use these and this to make something grow and be utilized.
Yeah, you know, here's the crazy thing. You know, we get caught up in this whole, like, you know, I need to use this to make all this stuff happen, but that is kind of the trick when you really get into it. And like you said, if we spent more time in nature as a kid, and that fellow I talked about, Rudolf Steiner, he created schools that were all about this, showing kids how nature worked, because then you see the abundance that nature provides and how we don't have to do very much. And this is where humanity gets so tripped up. Like, we think, like, it's a balance act, right? We don't need to do nothing. There are weeds that can come overtake my garden in like 3 weeks, and then you won't have any food. So it's not about, oh, Mother Nature's so perfect, we don't have to do anything. That's half true. You know, some human intervention is needed, but like I said, just like a caretaker, and then we would make these connections of how abundant nature is, and we just need to help her out a little bit. We don't need to introduce crazy chemicals, because that doesn't work. We see the results of that. They all run into the ocean, and the oceans are dying, and you know, it gets so scary talking about what's happening today.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to what we're talking about, that cycle, universal cycle of being able to utilize everything, and obviously having these not middlemen, but these things that are these applications, like about the things that are rolling into the sea, etc. There's no cycle. It seems it's very linear. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing that's coming
big time,
or whatever is coming back is a massive problem. So I've just got a little bit on it, little bit from Wikipedia, and just a little bit of information on what permaculture is. So I'm going to read this out for everyone as well. It's going to take a couple of minutes, and then you can touch base on anything else after that. So permaculture, the development of agricultural ecosystems intended to be sustainable and self-sufficient. That was one bit. Permaculture is a set of design principles centered around whole systems thinking, simulating or directing, or directly utilizing the patterns and resilient features observed in natural ecosystems. It uses these principles in a growing number of fields, from regenerative agriculture, rewilding, community and organizational design and development. With its system of applied education, research and citizen-led design, permaculture has grown a popular web of global networks and developed in a global social movement. The term permaculture was developed and coined by David Holmgren. Are you aware of this gentleman?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Then a graduate student at Tasmanian College of Advanced Education's Department of Environmental Design, and Bill Mollison, senior lecturer in environmental psychology at University of Tasmania in 1978. The word permaculture originally referred to permanent agriculture, or was expanded to stand also for permanent culture, as it was understood that social aspects were integral to a sustainable system, as inspired by Masanobu Fuku.
So Masanobu Fukuoka, he's the author of this book.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah.
So, and it's got a little bit more in there. It has many branches that are not limited to ecological design, ecological engineering, regenerative design, environmental design, and construction. Permaculture also includes integrated water resources management that develops sustainable architecture and regenerative and self-maintained habitat. Yeah, you take care, Keith. Agricultural systems modelled from natural ecosystems. So there's a lot being covered there.
Oh yeah, tons
being covered there.
Yeah.
But what I can say, one thing that really highlights all of that is how it almost seems like every single part of what's going on there is there's a link, there's a mold. It's like a chain going on along. Like,
Yeah.
you can't have one person doing this. Actually, the more people that actually get involved in this, you know, the more powerful the approach of actually giving back to Mother Nature it's going to be. You know, it's really going in depth.
Yeah, it's an exponential thing, like a Fibonacci sequence that gets better and better. And a good way to kind of ground that out is for one family to grow enough food for themselves is quite a bit of work. For two families to get together and grow enough food for themselves is not a lot. It's not twice the work. It's only, say, another 20% more work for double the gain.
Right.
And then, so the more you get into it, the more people you get, the more land, the more abundant you start getting the soil. It starts to exponentially grow for sure. And yeah, no, it's there's definitely a lot covered there. I like how it's circled back to the book too. I know if you get into researching Masanobu in the book, he's touched many lives. People have went to his farm, lived there for a couple months, and then they go back to their world and try and implement his techniques because, of course, the climate in Japan, the permaculture that's best there, it doesn't work here. You know, you have to, you know, the rules, the laws will apply, but the plants, the ground cover, you know, Japan, yeah, you gotta find a way to adapt. And that's kind of right where I'm at and getting with those around me. And something, we don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but it needs to be brought up, is mushrooms.
Right.
And the important role that mushrooms and their mycelium, which is like their root network, play into the environment. Mushrooms are kind of the bridge that bring it all together. It's how it brings intelligence to the ground, which sounds crazy, but you know, those are Rudolf Steiner's words, like your ground, your soil, when tended properly, it actually gains a certain amount of intelligence.
You know what? Sorry, go on, continue, sorry.
I was just saying that, and the mushroom mycelium, you know, Paul Stamets, one of the leaders in mushroom research, has this theory that this is the organic internet of the planet. Right. That like when you walk through a forest and you're stepping on the mycelium, it's telling the rest of the forest where you're at, what creature you might be. And if you go eat a plant, that plant via the mycelium is able to tell other plant members of its species, hey, this thing's eating us, transfer your nutrients to the roots for the greater good. Like, it's crazy. Like, no, it's
incredible.
Yeah, absolutely, it's intense.
Wow. Yeah, touching base on a little bit of when you were talking about the schools being made by Rudolf Steiner. Sorry, not Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah, no, it was Steiner, yeah.
And I was just thinking of some of the benefits, let alone actually being part of the universal system of growing foods and becoming sort of that synergy going on there. But the benefits of even like breathing, your breathing actually must change. Like, it must heighten, and the healing process naturally if you're grounding and your sense of smell and the ideas, not the ideas, the sense of calmness that will come to you because you're naturally around nature. I know that I don't know anyone who doesn't feel in sync when they are in nature. Like, I don't know anyone. Honestly, truthfully, I don't know anyone who's not in sync. I remember in my hard times, and they weren't really like World War III events, but you know, when I was down and out and really sort of just not even in sync with nature or nothing like that, but something drew me to nature, even when, like, you know, I wasn't working and stuff like that. I'd still find myself in the park, in the green. It just felt right to be in that environment. So
an old instinct, just to get yourself in there.
It's like, it was like calling me just naturally, you know, just to be in that environment. So just moving on to a little bit about permaculture gardening. So Do you want to touch base on that a little bit more? Like,
Yeah, I mean, like, so a lot of people, they get into permaculture, they read about it, and they maybe want to go head first in and, you know, plant a bunch of trees, and it's all good, but it's a bridge, right? You've got to take your soil, like, for example, in our yard, you know, we started with just containers, even though we have a bit of property, not very big, but we just had a green grass lawn, and eventually, a couple years ago, you know, I had the axe, and you're cutting the grass out, and you build up the soil, and we still plant things from seeds. You know, like the end goal in permaculture, I think, is you don't really plant anything. It comes back the year after, and like I said, you're just tending it. But don't, you know, beat yourself up if you're not there. I mean, go plant some stuff. Just start growing. It's such an amazing exchange. You're feeding the plants. They're cleaning the air. At the end of the day, they bring you some food. And then just be thinking about the permaculture and, you know, what tree can I plant, or what plant can I plant that loves to grow here, and I'm not going to have to water it or fertilize it. It's just going to do amazing, you know, quote unquote, what some people might call a weed. So it's, you know, that's just something to keep in mind. You know, you might not be in a place to just instantly start a permaculture operation, but, you know, get it going, you know, start where you can, and growing food is an excellent teacher, and it's such a motivator. I always tell this story. I had this tomato, and I put it outside too early, and it ended up blowing over, and I had to pretty much cut this thing right in half. I thought it was dead, but I humored myself and left it, and it sprouted 2 new heads, and it still ended up giving me tomatoes that year. So you even get, you know, like a mental inspiration from growing food. So whatever situation you're in, you got to dive in a little bit.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate where I live. I live with a retired gentleman and 3 dogs, and we moved back into his old house. He was his estranged wife died, so we moved back into the plant, and he spent some money, done it up, and I'm very, very fortunate. I live in a quite nice house. It's very nice, and the garden was a bit of a mess. And so lots of it got chopped down, a couple of trees as well, and I kind of felt a bit sorry, if that makes sense, because
totally,
the garden kind of just took a beating, but it just we wanted to start from scratch. We're going to get some herbs and stuff soon as well, actually. But
nice,
got stubs of trees, and the most amazing thing is, like, this tree's just not giving up. You can see so many areas like where it's growing again, and on both of them. And I've just recently planted an eucalyptus tree,
nice,
in the garden, to give some life and get some oxygen going again and whatnot. It's so interesting once you're in sync and watching nature. Literally, I mean, in the moment, watching nature, because I haven't not to say I haven't. The times when I haven't been in sync so much, have been really quite. Well, you just got to wonder where are you when you're not sort of thinking, when you're not able to see what nature gives to you, what nature actually generally provides. It's such a beautiful thing. It really is. You know what I mean? Like, even from looking at these stumps and seeing the colours of the leaves, and just thinking, oh, that's like really pungent sort of purple coming through. You think, it's coming like, I don't know where I was going with that, but it's just really...
you would love to read Rudolf Steiner. He's a tough read. You know, things get lost in translation, and it's one of those books, all of his books, where you're reading a paragraph and then you find yourself, you kind of got to reread it. You know, you get to an end of a chapter and you didn't really comprehend what you read. But a lot of it, like, he gets into, you know, what planets, you know, are the influence from the planets coming to Earth, and how that manifests into the different colors. Like yellow is a Jupiter thing, and so the green is the sun. So like the green of a plant, so much green, that's like a direct reflection of the sun. And it just, you know, it is such a beautiful thing, but it can also give you some amazing tools. And then, you know, it's not just knowledge. It's not just, oh, I know that this is this color because of that. It goes so much further. This all ties into alchemy, and how alchemists use this knowledge to, know what plants healed what. And like, so it goes very deep, and it is insanely beautiful. And you don't have to make it super complicated, but the reason I like the Rudolf Steiners, the alchemy, is it's like the true left brain masculine, linear knowledge of the mother nature, which is so, feminine and abundant and curvy, and it's not A to B logical. It's just growing here and growing there. And so for those listening that really want the, I don't really care what color it is or what planet it comes from, what's that going to do for me, which is a valid question. It's a question we need to ask ourselves more often. Turn to the alchemy, turn to the Rudolf Steiners. It's sure to be a good rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And I am familiar with Rudolf Steiner. When you said his name, it took a couple of clicks, and then I realised when you said psychology. I listened to some of his work. I read some of his works on Four Temperaments, I think it was, and a couple of other bits, and it was really going deep into psychology of man, basically. But story, but so when you talk about the language, I'm familiar. Very interesting character there. Very, very interesting.
He was one in his own, that's for sure. Yeah,
definitely. Social permaculture as well. I just wanted to touch base a little bit on this, and this is something which is quite beautiful in itself, especially for people who are, because they say it's almost like it is an up and coming sort of area at the moment where people are really kind of getting involved, and it seems to be thriving quite a lot. So social permaculture, it's almost like it's caring for people, like communions are being made with the synergy of nature as well, complemented with it. So, I mean, the idea of being able to meet new friends or bring out your family or bring out your friends and all get active and start caring for each other in a social sort of manner with permaculture sounds quite beautiful. Is that something that you
where I work at Light Cellar, there's lots of events like that. There a few places come to mind. This place called the Saskatoon Berry Farm, and they teach lots of classes, as do we at Light Cellar, about fermentation, about how to use the food that they're growing, and then they show you how to grow the food, and you kind of chip in and help. There's many different things like that go on here. And I know even for me and my partner, it's so nice to just get out in the garden and get super grounded and bring people together. The neighbors have a nice garden. It's, and you said it earlier, when you're in nature, you're just more in sync. Things are clicking. The conversations you're having, they produce results, whether it's healing results, like you're trying to get something off your mind, or you're just looking to vent. So the effect that permaculture can have on a community is grand and so important. It brings us together, and it's your food, right? It is your lifeline. It is, it's so primal, but it does definitely give you that connection and that community feeling. And definitely look for it in your area, to all the listeners, now that you have some of the key words, permaculture, even fermentation, you can find different classes. And, a lot of people that are on this path, it can get pretty lonely sometimes. You can be, quote unquote, the weirdo in the family, or the black sheep, or the, whatever we're calling it. But when you find these communities, these little people like your own, it changes so much. Yeah. And you gain a lot of knowledge, and you learn how to do lots of cool stuff, but you finally get that tribe, that sense of community.
Very interesting, because I'm going to be helping a friend. It's my boss at work, and we're going to be helping a mutual friend that we know. He's a gardener by trade. Nice. So, but he's got a little bit of work with a patio, which is not really his line of work. So we're going to be helping with that while they get the landscaping going on. So, funny enough, I'm probably going to corner him and ask him about and see where it's who you know, isn't it? So yeah, for sure, definitely for anyone who's listening who is interested in that sort of stuff, most definitely. Do you know what? Facebook might even be a good shout for it. You never know.
Oh yeah.
probably is groups already made, just waiting for us. So yeah, amazing stuff. So what is food? That is a very, very broad question, but you know, let's just take a couple of seconds and just let that one sort of breathe, as they're saying.
Yeah, what is food? It's an important question, very important. I teach a module with my health coaching clients that's called JERF. You know, it's the only diet I ever followed, the JERF diet, JERF, and that's just eat real food.
Right.
You know, very simple, but not easy. There's so much, you know, so even some of the food grown, you know, now with genetically modified foods, I mean, geez, it looks real. It tastes pretty real unless you know how it's supposed to taste. If you have a good connection, like if you're eating homegrown tomatoes, you will know when you have one that's not right. But it's such a good question to ask, you know, what is real food? And to me, it's, you know, there's so many buzzwords that come to mind, you know, organic, non-GMO, and this and that. But at the end of the day, you know, I think it's food that has got some life force still in it. It's real. It's from nature. It had a good life, whether that's, you know, you're eating meat and it's an animal, or it's a plant. You know, it was grown in a good environment. But man, it's such an important question, one that I hope more and more people start asking themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, I'll put my hands up and say that I have my moments still.
Oh yeah, oh, without a doubt.
I fluctuate through things, whether it be bread or this and that. I can honestly say 100% that I'm nowhere near what I used to be like. And actually, I'm going through a phase at this present moment. You probably see it in my skin. Where I need to up the game up again, but but that's just through my own. I slapped on slum protocols, and I can see the difference in it.
Yeah, I mean it's tough.
It's just the moment.
We don't live in easy times, especially when you're on this path and you're trying to spread the word. You know, there's a lot of stuff coming at you, and you look good. You don't. I definitely wouldn't have guessed. And I feel you. It's, you know, a good thing to keep in mind. And this is such a great rule, whether you're looking at business, money making, or making life choices. And that's the 80-20 rule. You know, so in business, not to go on that tangent, but just to explain, you know, 80% of the money you're making is likely coming from 20% of your clients. So, you know, it's, that's the 80-20 rule. But in your diet, I aim for the 80% healthy, organic, best I can do. And sometimes the other 20, it's not the best. We're still, you did come here to experience life and do your thing. And, you know, it's the physical body is one thing, but sometimes the emotions you gain or the release that can come from eating, you know, a cake or a pie, whatever your guilty pleasure is, there's benefit there too, and your body is strong, and you just have to have ways of you know, elimination's the biggest thing when it comes to your food. Yeah. And it's you know, you don't want to harbor too much guilt, and it's like the pendulum. We're always swinging back and forth, or a spiral, sorry, is how I like to put it. And like you said, you've come so far, so clearly you're moving up. But it's like a spiral, you know, you got bad on one side, good on the other, or easy or hard, however you want to put it. And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy, but nonetheless, you're going where you need to go. Right. And, you know, what we like to do in our house, a big part of our change in our journey, and for those who don't know, I used to be much larger, you know, about 300 pounds. And my partner had very bad digestion, even some brain issues.
Yeah, so just before you continue that, how long ago has it been since you was 300 pounds?
Well, all through high school, Greg. So I'm 26 now. So when I was 17, 18, I would have been literally 300 pounds. Grade 11 for sure. I just remember these pictures when I was in Peru. When I moved to the city here, I dropped to about 270, 280 for a few years, just because not having as much money or being more on the go, not too sure. But when I started to make the big change, that would have been about 22, 23, so 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, not too long, but it's been a couple of years now anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so a big part of that journey was these foods that I loved and wasn't really willing to give up. It was just, okay, well, how can I make them with the best ingredients possible? And then that opens up so many different doors, you know. So instead of closing doors, can't eat this, can't do that, open some other doors, you know. Oh, how do I, you know, like for breads, you just got to look into sourdoughs and fermenting the breads. I mean, geez, it's crazy. And bread's an interesting one, because even I'm noticing for myself, even if I spend crazy expensive money on the fanciest sprouted grain, gluten-free, all the buzzword organic bread, if I eat it, I don't feel great the next day.
Yeah.
I'll be a bit bloated. It's not the end of the world. It's sometimes, like I said, it's worth it. It's not, you know, we don't have to beat ourselves up too much. But on the other side of that, I've done, it's called teff. It's a type of flour from Ethiopia, and I did a fermented teff wraps. And my God, I mean, I can eat like 6 of those. And of course, you're putting the sauerkraut on it and chickpea miso, so all these different fermented foods. And you wake up flat stomach, feeling good. You don't got any mental fog. So there's a way to get what you want, you know,
Yes.
and still feel pretty good. And I think that's the key to this, you know. What is food? It's food that you can eat. It feels good. You're not feeling guilty about it. One thing, my dad just visited me a couple months ago, and one thing he said to me that was so cool is, he says, Jeff, you know, every time you grab something in the kitchen, you know where it came from, and you have like a little story. Oh, these are onions from Bob's garden, or oh, this rice is wild grown in Saskatchewan, like, and that's real food. You know, I'm not reading it going, oh, it's modified cornstarch from this factory. So it's when you have that connection, it's not about, is it a superfood with all this nutrition? I mean, there's, you know, that's important too, but you know, real food is just, you know, where it came from. Yeah, great. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, beautiful word. Your relationship with the food. And it's not always going to be perfect, but no relationship is. You're working on it.
Totally. It becomes artificial. So yeah, food, just reading off of what it says on here as a noun, is any nutritious substance that people or animals eat or drink, or that plants absorb in order to maintain life and growth. And that's the key part there at the end, is to maintain life and growth. So I guess the next question really that I'd like to know is, well, I'll read out what artificial means, and then I think dive in a little bit, just a little bit on this one. Made or produced by human beings rather than occurring naturally, especially as a copy of something natural. I'll read that again for everyone.
Interesting, yeah.
Made or produced by human beings rather than occurring naturally, especially as a copy of something natural. Artificial foods. Okay. Now let's just go in on this a little bit, because, you know, I've first of all, I've said this before. I don't think that's the right word. I'll restart that. I don't feel that food is the primary source of energy for us human beings, or anything personally. I feel our primary energy is nature's primary currencies. You know, air, water, fire, blah 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 blah, blah, all those things.
Big time.
Instead, if you are, there doesn't need to be a word. If you're someone who eats food, digests food, then the idea of eating food should be that what you eat is beneficial to your body and the growth of whatever, and the growth of your spiritual being, or no, of healing and increasing the body's frequency, I guess, so that you can have a higher experience in your spiritual setting, which is primarily your first, because your body is your vehicle, right? So
Yep.
food is, the idea is to maintain and repair the body. And in that respect, if you can do that, you can probably, I would assume, have a better relationship or synergy going on within your spiritual being. And so you'll have a higher frequency and you'll be able to experience more with your, if you are applying the primary currencies as well, you should hopefully clock things, depending on shadow work as well, but that's another story. What would you like, but with artificial foods, this is where I'm going, them not being natural, not being made by Mother Nature, and you touched base on this already, obviously, that they're not going to be electric, or they are going to be electric, but they're not going to be as electric because they haven't been, they haven't got the natural umbilical cord, you know, like the umbilical cord,
Yep.
Mother Nature, to the fruit or to the plant or whatever it may be, because it's not, it's just, it didn't have the seed.
It's not from this world in a way.
Exactly. So when we...
And we are of this world.
Absolutely. So eating or eating a certain amount of artificial food, or should we say, let's put 100% on it. So if you're definitely eating sort of more 51% and 49%, if you're over 51% of eating natural, artificial foods, what do you reckon would be the symptoms and the issues that one may, I think you know where I'm going with this.
Many. I mean, the biggest thing, to break it down, if you eat artificial food, then you're going to be artificial.
Right.
And then it becomes kind of like a vicious circle. So, you know, one of the big benefits of going to one of these Steiner schools and working in nature is you see how abundant nature is. And then you wouldn't fall for the trick that gets played. And the trick that gets played is we need GMO foods to provide enough food for the world. You know, we need to put fluoride in the water to fix your teeth. We need to, there's many tricks, and it all comes down to you can't do it, nature can't do it, but the almighty human sure can. And don't get me wrong, I think humans are amazing creatures. It's just been twisted. So once you know that, you know, nature does provide, then you're good. You can eat the real food. But if you're eating all the artificial food, you're so susceptible to these concepts, to these ideas. It's like you embody it. It's literally inside you. And, you know, it's tough for me to put this into words, you know, this concept, but it's, you know, if you eat the fake foods all the time, and again, no one's perfect, but if this is, you know, you eat the fake foods, you defend the fake foods, you're convinced that that's the way, well, then to me, it's just such a sad mindset. You know, I don't even know where that ends. Like, it's, you know, you're constantly going to be looking to the external to fill something that we can just do with the land all on our own. You know, we already produce enough food to feed the world, if I'm not mistaken. The issue is distribution, and we throw it all out.
Right.
So, you know, and then going back to the symptoms, you know, the quote that comes to mind, I can't remember who said it. I mean, there's the great Hippocrates quote, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." But the other good one is, you know, your food is either, it can be many different things on this, you know, kind of like a pH scale. Neutral being, it's not really, you know, it's sustaining you, it's not killing you, it's not healing you, but it's the bare minimum. You know, if you're eating all these unhealthy foods, you dip down and it becomes the slowest form of poison. Right. And the symptoms, this is where all this stuff about your genes and your dad had this cancer, so you're going to get this cancer, that's all that stuff just determines what's going to happen, how sick you're going to get, all that. But it's not what made you sick. That's the food. The food decides whether you're spiraling up or spiraling down. And what spiraling down means for you, what symptoms you get is just, that's going to be, it totally depends. But, you know, if you can switch it, right, you just have to start eating the best you can, whatever that means. Because unfortunately, too, we live in times where to be super healthy is like a privilege. Like you need, a certain income. You need, and it's something. Oh, it's, this is where it gets evil. And I hate looking at the world this way. And I don't really look at the world this way. I see the players in the game, and it's orchestrated evil. Like it's insane. Like for me, we did the math. Like our food budget in our house is nuts. Like it is by far the biggest bill from a month to month basis. And to make a good organic supper, especially if you're a meat eater, which I'm not. And I mean, one of the things that keeps me from ever going back is the price of good quality meat is unbelievable. And so anyways, going back to it, the price of making a good quality organic meal for 2 people, I mean, you're talking $50 a day, easy. Like it's not hard. The organic greens for the salad and the right grains and the proper rices. Yet we could go to McDonald's for like $6. And so it's nuts. And we talked at the beginning of the conversation about these kind of middlemen in our lives and with permaculture. And the biggest middleman is money. And let me be clear here, I love money, and I hope money loves me, because I need a lot of it to do the things I want to do in this world. But money has given man and woman an excuse. I'm doing this for the money. It doesn't matter that I'm, what's a good example? I'm spraying Monsanto chemicals on this field. I need money. So, screw you, nature. It's me or you. They've backed us into this corner of us versus nature, and they've used money. And, it's, and like I said, don't hate money. You got to be careful there. That's a whole game and a whole conversation on its own. But at the end of the day, you just kind of have to know that nature can provide for you, but it takes work. It's not, I think a lot of millennials fall into this trap of we just got to go meditate about abundance and then it's all going to be good. No, it does take the other side, the balance, the work, the effort, but you'll be fine. We don't need GMO foods. We don't need all the crazy fake foods. And it's, and a big part of it too, going back to the symptoms, is you're getting toxic. And toxic, as you know, means so many different things. It's not just about your body. It's about your thoughts, about your spirit, your will, and what you want to do. And the more toxic you get, the worse it gets. I met an old friend, and I mean an old friend, a guy I hadn't seen since, we were like playing sword fighting as a kid. And so we went very different ways in life. And we were sitting there, and he told me he hated nature. The words out of his mouth that he wanted, where he worked or outside of his house, there was a park, and he would rather have a mall there. And he was so cynical. And I was just almost kind of laughing, like, and that right there is the symptom of eating artificial food. You just want more artificial. I mean, look where it's going. Our bodies aren't good enough anymore. We want implants, and that whole field just terrifies me where that's going. And it all just kind of stems from this lack of trust in nature. And it's wild.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just touch base on a little bit of that. The word that just keeps popping into my head with artificial food, and please, when I share this, I'm not perfect, but most definitely I can feel for anyone who's far worse than where I am. My very first job was McDonald's, proper job. You know what I mean? Like, so I had 5 years of their plastic food. But the word that pops into my head is blocker, in the sense of see individuals that have a very artificial affair with foods. What blocker means, in the sense of it blocks. I can't go all scientific, but I know it blocks particular senses where you can't think. You're not very sharp in how you think.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
You can't sit still. These are just little things I'm touching base on. The fact that you're eating more artificial foods as well makes you less conductive. Because we the earth charges us up. If you're constantly eating stuff that is not live or near enough dead, then you become you can't what's the right word? I'm losing my words at the moment. You won't be able to function basically properly or as well as you probably can, and with that as well comes the lack of healing that your body goes through, the lack of the natural detoxification your body goes through. That takes a slow process, and you can see this in this is why your body gets backed up and why people get fat and get big. It's because you're being blocked up. You know, literally can't get rid of what you're eating, and that's not just on artificial. Do you know what? I'm just going to say it straight. Artificial food is generally it's irregular to any natural being. Full stop. Plant, human, whatever. It's unnatural. It doesn't fit correctly. It will work, and the amazing thing is why it will work is because you can see it in nature. Like you can chuck 101 different types of fertilizers, pesticides, different seeds, and the beautiful thing what Mother Nature will do is it will find a way to sink because it will never want to die. You know what I mean? It doesn't do that. It will find a way to make everything blend and live in harmony in the best way possible. You know what I mean? And that's what our body, that's what plants do. So it's constantly going through a beautiful, chaotic sort of environment. Where
death and rebirth, at all times. The thing is Mother Nature is got, tons of different entities at her disposal. So she can take that and say, yeah, it's poisonous for this, but feed it over here.
Right.
We're one thing. We're a human. I mean, we've got many different components, but you have to feed yourself what works for you. And as you said, the artificial food, it definitely doesn't fit in. I loved how you called it a blocker. I think that's an excellent way to put it. And for those who are super sciencey, I mean, in a nutshell, a lot of these foods, white sugars, they're very stimulating. They activate the immune system. They're actually putting you in a fight or flight state, which I think is parasympathetic versus sympathetic. I can't quite remember. But at the end of the day, why that's important, because we're in fight or flight so much these days. I mean, you get cut off in traffic, you look at your bank account. I mean, there's so many different triggers. And when you're in fight or flight, you only have blood flow to the core of the brain. So all these outer things like compassion, empathy, to be able to even like understand what we're talking about, how nature works in a cycle, and like you essentially don't give a shit. It doesn't, it's not important to you. Yeah. And when you're locked out of this outer frame of thought for long enough, then you see it all over. We've got the zombie apocalypse. Most people, they're just, I mean, they're not eating us, thank God, but they're just walking around and they can't even think about the greater issues. And the odd time you are thinking about the greater issues, you get told you're not an expert, smarter people know more than you. Oh, okay, thank you. Ludicrous. Back to, you're kind of coddled.
Ludicrous. I mean, if we could put on those glasses in that old film, I forget what it's called. I think it had that wrestler, Rowdy Roddy Piper, in it. But anyways, if we could have some special type of glasses and see people actually degrading through stress, anxiety, wrong implementation of foods, not eating the correct foods, and just be able to see someone sort of degrading at the same time, it will be it will be able to give us a clear picture as to how, and eating like the artificial foods, etc. It will be a clear picture for people to actually see that. I hate the fact that what you touch based on when they say, "Oh, you're not a scientist. There's no clear this, that."
Yeah.
But
well, it's crazy.
I don't know how to really approach that. Maybe I'm sort of.
I know what you mean. I do, and it's where that came from. Is right now I'm going through it big time because we're in 2011, we were lucky enough here to turn off the fluoride taps in our water. We got city council to see the light. It was not ethical, but now it's coming back. They want to bring it back. There's a vote happening, and we're doing everything we can. But the two arguments being launched at me are, you're not an expert. You know, how can all these places who have been doing it for years be wrong and you be right? So they always make you seem small. And it's not just water fluoridation. It's every argument out there. This is what's played. You know, you're not an expert. You have no idea what you're talking about. Other people do, and it's so disempowering. And then the other game they play is the emotional game, the straw man argument. It's like, if Zeke, if I say, you know, do you love cats or dogs? And you say, oh, I like dogs. And then I say, oh, well, why do you hate cats? That's not what you said. You know, that's a straw man argument.
Right.
And with the water fluoridation, what they do is they say, oh, you don't want fluoride in the water. You must hate kids. You know, how do you feel about kids going to bed with a toothache tonight? And it's just crazy. You know, that's the game that gets played. And then it causes you to be confused. And then, okay, I'm in, and again, it goes back to fight or flight. And then you just do what the bigger group's doing, and you look around you, most people are eating this messed up food, and that's what, you know, we fall into this trap. And it's wild. But at the end of the day, you know, there's so many different solutions. You just have to decide that you don't really want to play their game anymore. And awareness is 9/10 of it. You know, like you said yourself, you know, you're not perfect. You eat the odd thing, but the fact that you have your checks and balances, you know, and then you think, okay, well, this happened, and well, and I'll probably do a fast at some point. Like, you know what I mean? You figure it out, and your body just loves you for it. It's like, oh, thank you so much, and you feel good. But to someone who's never experienced that, never went through a fast, and never, like, it's, you know, I know we're going off topic a bit, but it's so hard to get through to people like that. Like with these water fluoride people, like these are kids who generally, like, they literally just want to help kids. So it's super hard for me to like just attack them or attack their character, but it's so easy for them to attack me and mine. And it's tough, you know. That's how the game is played, and you just got to stand your ground and so on.
Totally, I know, and I feel for you and everyone else who's in that situation where they're actually standing up for what they feel is true.
Yeah.
And real and honest, and, you know, and I've got nothing against modern science or anything of the sort. In fact, I feel like we're in a position where, you know, actually being able to mold both of them together and work.
Yeah, big time.
We have a massive advantage. It's just such a shame in this day and age that it's not looked upon that way, or it's not approached upon that way. We're very much, it's still left or right hand sided. We're not looking for no sort of balance. It's go the modern way.
Yeah.
And go and lose sync with nature, you know, like it's absolutely ludicrous.
Where I work at Light Cellar there, we sell herbs and superfoods, and we see a lot of the polarization. You get people coming in, and it might be a husband that's with their wife, and the husband, he looks like he's, you know, in a I don't know how to describe it, like he's in a place he doesn't want to be in, you know, like he's like, oh my God, I don't believe in any of this. And it goes the other way too. You get the people who, oh, I would never go to a hospital no matter what. But I'll tell you right now, the healthiest people that come into our shop are those that take the best of both worlds. So right. I'm not a big fan of modern medicine's treatments, but their imaging, the blood testing when done properly and interpreted properly, like these are amazing tools. So the people that use half of that world, and then they come to the natural world for the food and for the herbs they take, those are like the ladies coming in that, like, she could pass for 30 and she's 65, like stuff like that. Or the, you know, the people who walk that middle path, don't get caught up in the it's all this way or all that way, because it never works like that. You know, that's in the, I don't know how to pronounce it, the Kabbalion or the Kybalion. It's Hermetics. Again, it's like mental alchemy. It's, you know, we live in a very paradoxical world. You know, and you just need to understand that when you even, it's as a good way to keep this in mind is like, you know, we all have like those breakthrough moments, like, oh, I just have to start doing this, or it's just this. Well, it's half that. Always, always. It's never always just one thing. And if the better you get at walking that balanced path, taking the best of all worlds, and just standing up, like you said, for what you know is true, and that can change. You know, things change, and real science shows that everything's always changing. And you know, science is amazing, but science, what do they call that? Science-ism, like scientist-ism is not. That's, you know, speaking on the cult side of it, where, you know, they'll cling to certain studies that have been funded by XYZ, and then they're not willing to change. It becomes very similar to a religion, you know. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a lot of religion either, but, you know, I always say a little joke is science is the new religion, and if you don't believe it, you're going to be burned at the stake, literally. Like, they, you know, your friends and colleagues will just, you know, assault you. Yeah, it's.
I'm with you. Yeah, 100%. I'm with you. I'm a firm. I don't like the word believe, but I'm a firm believer that there's a path that is in alignment for all, for example, for all human species, you know, all spiritual beings on this planet. Like, there is a line that we all can walk, which is in alignment with who we truly are. And every unique spiritual being has this opportunity, because we live in this world today, where we can apply things, whether it be foods, herbs, people, whatever. Like, we can apply things, but there is a path that fits and works 100% without fail, because it's been given to us. It's like an invisible vehicle thread from nature and everything else around us that allows us to walk this path, you know.
Yeah.
And animals have it, plants have it, and anything else is just an application, you know. With too many applications, problems naturally occur, because you become you become out of sync, or you're just applying way too many. You'll find that a lot of people that apply things aren't really true alchemists, hence why they get ill and unwell, you know, because they don't know what they're dealing with, let alone what they're not dealing with as well. I'm also a firm believer, and I'll go back onto GMO foods after this, is that when it comes to foods, we have a natural internal periodic table. By actually understanding, and I'm still working on this, by actually understanding how to fill those jars up, essentially, and back on par, I'm not hugely convinced that we would actually have to eat that much as we do anyway. It's very much more a luxury the way we eat in this day and age. But once
big time.
Work out how to fill them up, I feel that our avatar will flourish in such an amazing way. Food, again, will be an application. You know, if you're an athlete, you have certain foods that, you know, can build clarity or strength, or you'll apply them in just small amounts because they'll benefit you, because you're doing 6 hours of major permaculture, for example. Do you know what I mean? Or
big time.
Who's a beautiful naturist and you want to go deep dive mentally, meditation, there's some great herbs and there's some great types of food that you can apply to enhance those areas. That's how really we should be having this relationship with food. And we'll find that actually there is an abundance, like you've already shared on that there wouldn't be a scarcity, as they call it, because it's not about to survive. It's not, there's no other animal that eats like us. I don't know any other animal that gets down to breakfast, lunch and dinner.
And I mean, and it's all timed, and it's all, you know, it's crazy how we've tied food in with all of our emotions, and me included. I struggle with this one too, even thinking about a life where I can't eat as much as I want, you know, brings on certain emotions, and it's a tough one for people to go through. I mean, I fully agree. You do not need that much food. I mean, that was one of the things that blew me away the first time I read it. It was from a doctor who supports fasting, and he showed how like an averaged male, 165 pounds, it was 70 kilograms, whatever that equals out to, could fast for 70 days before they went into starvation mode, like before your body actually started to eat your organs. And if you would have to be sitting. If you're active and running through the bush, then that's 40 days, still a very long time. And when I read that, I was just like, man, you know, we can go 40 days without eating. You know, that's nuts. And a great, I love your little analogy with the periodic table. And when all your little jars are topped up, you're good to go. And the only spin I would put on that is not all of those jars are food related. You know, there's food, you know, plants, minerals, even some animal products. But a lot of those jars too are emotional jars. And we fill those up via food, whether that's our family dinner or going out with friends. You know, we think it's the food we're going out for, but it's actually maybe that emotional connection, stuff like that. And that's where I'm at on my path, is learning how to fill some of these jars without the food. But it's tough because we've twisted it in our consciousness. We've married it all and tangled it all up. You know, you've got to go in there and dig out the shrapnel, and it's doesn't happen overnight, that's for sure. Yeah. And it just takes awareness. And I'm sure you've been there. Like you tell yourself, man, I just want to let loose tonight and eat this, and you do it, and you got something out of that evening, but you realize it wasn't the food. The food is leaving you feeling not so good today. And then you just go at it again the next time, and you try and get that feeling without the food, or with less of it, or better versions of it, or, you know, it all depends on where you're at.
Yeah, amazing. I just wanted to touch base a little bit on GMO foods. It's kind of basically entangles itself with artificial foods, but you spoke about some foods that are artificial. Did you want to chuck a few foods out there for everyone to sort of get an idea of what's most things in that age?
The 5 biggest offenders, if we're going to call them that, are wheat. You know, again, most of it's genetically modified. Soy, 98% of the world's supply is genetically modified. So wheat, soy, dairy, commercial dairy products. Now, this is a tricky one, because if you can ever get your hands on raw dairy from an excellent source, very difficult to do. I would imagine almost no one listening to this is in that position. But if you can, I'm just trying not to demonize something that can be an amazing food. Raw dairy products can be insanely healing, but it's so rare in our world. It's illegal in Canada. You can't even buy raw dairy. So conventional dairy falls in there. So we got wheat, soy, dairy, white sugar falls in there. And then there's one more escaping me. Wheat, sugar, soy, dairy, and there's just one more that's I can't quite remember. But those are the top 4 anyway, foods that are almost always going to cause you griefs, and definitely want to avoid them. And a big reason is due to how many of them are genetically modified now. It's a massive issue, I think. It's definitely something I wish we weren't doing. And not only are we doing it, but here in North America, like, they don't even have to label it. They don't even have to tell you that it's genetically modified. So it's half the time you don't know. You're left with taking people's word for it. And organic is supposed to mean non-GMO, but that can't be the case. No, I mean, there's so many watermelons and different grapes that get sold as organic, but they're all seedless, which can only come from a modification process. So, you know, it all falls back into just eating real food, and genetically modified food definitely falls under that artificial category. And I just don't see a need for it. Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, same with like something like the water fluoridation issue. It's like, why are we even going here? You know, it just doesn't make much sense to me. And again, it's always being sold as we need to. We got to feed the world. They play on the emotions, et cetera, et cetera. But the biggest thing I'd say with GMOs, you know, do your best to avoid it, and see the benefits for yourself. I think one of the biggest symptoms of eating the seedless fruits and genetically modified foods is the toxicity due to the chemicals that are put on it. And then, you know, the infertility that we're seeing in our day and age, which is quite massive. Yeah, especially male infertility issues, seeing so much of that. And I think, you know, it's and I love the doctrine of signatures, which is where, you know, a walnut, it looks like a brain, it's good for your brain. You know, you cut a carrot, it looks like the cornea of your eye, and it's good for your eye. Well, if I eat a grape that can't produce more grapes, there's no seeds, you know, what's that going to do to me? And it's not like you eat a few of them and it's going to kill you, but it's, you know, if this is all you start eating, then, you know, as within, so without, you know, you'll be seedless.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And
it does. Yeah. And this is where, you know, the science, they'll say, no, you just don't understand. You're not smart enough. You don't get it. But, you know, life's not complicated. It wasn't meant to be super insane. You know, look how many, you know, look at the animals thriving and doing just fine. And they don't have what we have. So it's, you know, we don't have to make it so complicated. We also don't have to live like animals. We can use our brains and have amazing things, you know, everything in balance. But, you know, we definitely don't need to, like the GMO stuff's wild. It's like they're taking, you know, fish genes out of a fish and putting it into a tomato to make it more cold resistant. And it's like, who?
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Or maybe we shouldn't grow tomatoes where it's too cold to grow tomatoes. Just grow something else that's abundant there. And where it's warm enough to grow tomatoes, let them grow a ton and we'll do a little trade, you know, like it doesn't take, you know, it doesn't take a rocket science to look at this and go, why are we doing it?
100%. I'm with you. And there's a couple of things that I want to touch base on. I wanted to say this a bit earlier, you know, maybe this is something that, I'm sure there's people doing this already, but actually the idea of having a group of you, so even if it was just 4 or 5 of you, and say, you know, you all dedicated yourself to growing 2 or 3 items, you know, like solidly 2 things. So that's 10 different types of products, and then you share them. You know what I mean? Like, and you're abundance. I think this is really the way people need to start.
I mean, even your uniqueness would start to tie into it, because you would think, like in your community, you would say, oh, you know, Mary over there, she grows such nice tomatoes, and Johnny over here, geez, he grows the best spuds or whatever it is. And that's exactly how it would work. And you would just do and grow what you love to do, and someone's got your back. And at the end of the day, nature has everyone's back. There's so many different foods and herbs, and you know, it's truly, it is abundance. You know, that's true abundance is what's coming from nature.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just thinking about supermarkets and the way foods are set up in this day and age as well. Organic or GMO, whatever you want to call it. It's just the actual the shelf life of food from being taken away from the plant, you know, the fruit or veg or whatever it may be. So the idea of seeing, for example, like packs of blueberries on the shelves in the supermarket, Bobby brought this up and it was just resonated a lot. It makes a lot of sense. So you walk into a supermarket, you see the blueberries or the fruits on the shelf in their packaging, and you know they've sat there for X amount of days. You know, well, before they've even got to the supermarket, they've been picked, and you'll probably find that they've either been picked too early or the GMO. They've taken their time. That's however many days, do you know what I mean, before they even get to the warehouse, and then from the warehouse to the store, packaged and stored. And then they sit on the shelf for a certain amount of time as well. Now, I know that in nature, or anyone with half a brain, in nature, once you pick something from its primary source, you know, from its leaf, the berry from the tree, you know, it's not going to last 10 days. It just doesn't work like that. The energy from that starts depleting instantly from when it's left its branch or wherever it's come from, you know. So if you can try and put that into your mindset, the individuals that are sort of watching, how the foods that we are eating in supermarkets, and I'm guilty of it as well, are naturally depleted. I don't care how many fruits you eat or veg. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying
Big time.
bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or anything. I'm just saying you've got to think out from an energetical point of view. The type of foods that you're eating are naturally depleted. They are not enriched in what you may think or what you feel they should have. And that's not even adding on the fact that what the soil's like, because no one knows what the soil's like.
Yeah, I mean, what was in the food to begin with? Did it have
Yeah.
what it needed to begin with? Because, you know, in the commercial growing, they've broken it down to 3 parts. And that's, you know, when you look at a fertilizer, it's always in 3 different numbers. Potassium, potassium, nitrogen, and potash are the 3 different things. And I mean, look at how many different minerals we have in the soil. So how could they have broken it down to 3 things? So when you look into it, those 3 things will make the plant grow and look good. It'll have the exterior properties that it needs, but internally it'll be very deprived. And like you said, so I mean, it's deprived right when it's picked too early, which is super important for fruits. They don't have all their enzymes. They don't have the enzymatic activity that they should. And then on an energetic standpoint, just that electricity, that conductive energy is definitely depleted. And one thing that's in the One Straw Revolution there that was I really resonated was he was talking about in the olden times at like a market, the vegetables and fruits would be withered and nobody cared. It was a good thing when you pick something, it should wither. It's like
Right.
when you fast, your body slows down, like your metabolism slows right down. Your body only uses what it needs. The plant's the same way. It's slowing down, withering, so it's reserving its nutrients for you to eat them. At the supermarkets, when they're constantly spraying it with water to make it look good, the plant's burning up everything it has stored because it's not being allowed to wither and do its thing. So there's so many angles. And the big point, because like you said, it's a good thing. You want people eating fruits and veggies. You can only do what you can do. I would say, you know, this conversation, this part of it is more aimed at, you know, real long-term solutions, you know, doing away with supermarkets and how that works. Like, to me, instead of a supermarket, just imagine if instead of a big supermarket, it was a giant greenhouse.
Well, you're on the road to it, mate. Just looking from behind you. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, exactly. We got lots of stuff growing here. And you just imagine, you know, you walked in and it's just a big greenhouse and there's so many, you know, cool things we could be doing and we are doing. And I always echo that to people. You don't have to get caught up in thinking that we need to develop some crazy solutions. We have it all. People like Rudolf Steiner, these legends have laid it all out for us. The only thing left to fall in place is just a shift in consciousness. And for us to realize we don't have to play these games anymore, you know, it's easier said than done. You know, I still have a job. I'm still, you know, grinding it out. It's not always just a big dream. But at the end of the day, it's if you change yourself and you do the best you can, and if the best you can simply means getting you healthy, then that's amazing. You're going to change the world by doing that, by getting in shape, eating the right foods, you're voting with your dollars, you're spending on organic, doing the best you can, you're inspiring those around you. Even if you don't say anything, people just watching you change. Like, it's so powerful. So we don't got to get caught up in, you know, how do we save the world and do this and that. You just look in the mirror and start with yourself, and you will cause so many different chain reactions that it's unbelievable.
Yeah, amazing stuff, and I'm with you on everything you just said there. Something that caught my eye, actually, I was just browsing the internet just earlier before we came online, was and it's in connection with GMO foods, is that they're supposedly going to be, well, it says here GMO foods will soon be mislabeled as biofortified. Is that something you've...
No, but it doesn't surprise me. Biofortified.
You know?
I mean,
you know, obviously GMO's taking such a beating, and it's one when you hear GMO and people are most definitely connected more on a, call it a negative sort of vibe. They think, oh, fake or this or that. So they've had to switch it up. They need to change it now because the mind hive is sparking, not in the way that they see.
Yeah, yeah, they gotta change and divert, and that's like, you know, same thing with organic. It kind of, some people like my mom will say, oh, it's all a scam, organic food, some new age crap. And in some ways she's right. Like, I'm sure you've been at the store and you've bought something organic and you just didn't feel good. Like, it just, you could tell it wasn't healthy, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my mom's had the same experience. But one thing I changed that shifted it for her was, you know, 100 years ago, everything was organic. There's no such thing as inorganic food.
Yeah.
So I almost wish we just left it the same. Food was food, but all this other stuff that came had some sort of funky name. And I love the bio-fortified because, you know, what could be more fortified with biology and life than an organically grown plant? You know, bio-fortified. That's too funny.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's almost, it's done literally just done a 160 on itself and just landed at the same position with a new name, with a new face.
Yeah, well, it happens all the time. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that right there is kind of how you know that what's happening in our world is orchestrated evil. It's a plan. You know, many people before us have chopped the heads off these issues and defeated them and buried them, whether it's water fluoridation, screwing with the foods, heck, even vaccinations was defeated in like the early 1900s, but it always, you know, the head regrows like a hydra, you know, and we're left here to cut it off again because of, you know, there's power behind it. But at the end of the day, you know, we can feel pretty helpless. But like I was saying, if you just do what you can for yourself, you'll change so much, like so much.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll leave the GMO bit with just this saying here, which says the term biofortification, at least within European countries, risks consumer confusion as to whether they are purchasing organic products or something else entirely. Now, all I can say, and I'm not even going to delve into it anymore, is to just wake up, guys. You know, like, stop being bullied by, this is just legalese at its highest. You know, it's what legal does. This is what science does with all these weird names and weird labels. Like, so you don't,
they make something simple complicated.
Yeah, you don't understand any of it, and actually the root of whatever it is something very, very simple. You know, so that being said, if it's being confused like that, try and have a little bit of savvy and think, okay, well, why is it being confused? Because it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be. No. It should be able to convert something to the masses on a very simple level. Unfortunately, they're not capable of, or they are capable of doing it. They just don't want to. But that's just my personal view. Don't say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cigarette argument, you know, and if anyone's ever familiar with someone named Edward Bernays, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud, we could call him the grandfather of psychology. And then Edward Bernays was the grandfather of crowd psychology. He's not a good man. He's where the cigarette companies turned to sell cigarettes. This is where the aluminum industry turned when they needed to get rid of their fluoride through water fluoridation. They went to Edward Bernays. He was a master at convincing people to do stuff via crowds, via slogans, things that don't make sense. Like, he got women to smoke by saying it was a feminine thing. It was, you know, feminine power. And he made the slogan, torches of freedom. That's what cigarettes were, torches of freedom. And he's showing all these proud women, you know, smoking. And it's crazy. And it basically all boils down to, like, and with cigarettes too, they came out and said, you know, in their board meetings, we don't have to convince people cigarettes are good for them. We just have to cast doubt on that they're bad for them. Because when there's doubt and we make it confusing and we say there's studies that say this and we make it, like you said, very confusing, then it's like a 50-50. And then if someone decides to do it and it feels good, now they'll keep doing it. Like they've got you, they know you better than you know yourself.
Right.
And, you know, they create the doubt, and then they create groups, and they make it always seem like their group's the bigger group, you know, whether that's smoking, that was a big one. All the actors, everyone's smoking, so why aren't you? You know, the vaccine thing comes in, and which is a very touchy subject, but you know that they always make it seem bigger groups, and you got to follow the herd or you'll be left alone for the slaughter, when often you're already in the bigger group. They always play it on the fear strings.
Yeah. Just a little bit I want to touch on it is actually just going back to soil.
Yeah.
What is it that you do? Because obviously we touched base on soil being depleted, and but I've always been quite interested. I'm not based in the garden too tough. It's something I really truly hope that I can sort of touch base on more, and I'll probably be touching base more with you and seeing how you get on with stuff. So I've seen some of your work behind you. I'm sure that's just a little bit, but what do you apply to your soil to better it? And
yeah, the biggest thing is the compost. So we have 2 different compost bins. Like the city has a city compost for things like your cat litter and foods you didn't eat that maybe went bad. And like, I don't put anything sketchy in my garden compost, just, you know, fruits, veggies, all my herbs, like all my tonic herbs from the teas, you know, which are so mineral dense and amazing.
Yeah.
So you've got your compost, and then when you're growing food, everything goes back to the garden. And now that should even mean your poop, and I'm not there yet. Very difficult in a city situation to be kept, and then you have to have very proper compost, and it's not totally ideal in a city or doable, but by everything goes back to the garden. Like when I harvest my potatoes, all the rest of the plant, I just leave it there. Like when it dies, I just leave it there. And then at the end of the year, I pick them, put them in a compost bin so they degrade quicker. But then that mush goes back on the field. Everything goes back. And then to build it up, you know, the compost, the herbs are helping. But this is where, just like your microbiome, you want to be eating good bacteria, the soil needs proper bacteria. So you can get different little powders, organic powders that have, and it's all about amending your soil. And then the other component there is the mushroom mycelium, and you can get powdered mushroom mycelium to start getting in the garden. And the biggest thing is it doesn't take much. You can go out, you can cut the grass up with an axe, remove the chunks of grass, mix in some organic garden soil from the store. If your soil's like really clay-like or not very fertile, you can add some soil, good black dirt, no chemicals, you just need good black dirt. And then just start growing, and then follow that rule that as best you can, everything coming from the garden is going back to the garden. And that's the best you can do, and it'll do very well. I don't use any fertilizers or plant foods, just my own compost. The only caveat there is when I first started gardening, I didn't buy organic soil, so some of my pots, which have ended up in the garden, would have some chemical fertilizer, but I'm hoping by this point it should be pretty null and void. But my stuff grows great. The stuff that doesn't grow great, maybe it wasn't a year for that. And one thing that I found so interesting in doing the gardening is how it seems like globally certain plants do good every year and certain ones don't. And so obviously, like in your city, that would make sense. Everyone in the city is experiencing the same weather, so certain plants will grow that liked that weather. But, you know, for example, last year, the beets did unbelievable. My parents' beets, and they live 2,000 kilometers away from me, their beets grew good. And it just seems like everyone you talk to, we all had great beets. So I think a lot of times what's going to do good has more to do with the energies in the air, planetary influences, which Steiner gets into there. So you know, where I'm going with this is people will think, oh, this didn't do good. Oh, what, I got to do soil tests and add a bunch of fertilizer and just put the brakes on and just do your best to keep it natural. Not everything always goes great. You know, there'll be some surprises. And I'm even seeing it now behind me in the seed stage. Like I can tell right now, like going to be a great year for tomatoes. They're all doing well, but the cabbages are struggling. Half of the cabbages, some of them aren't sprouting. Some of them are sprouting and then dying. And this happened last year with carrots, and they didn't have great carrots. So it's, you know, it's just, you start to see that there's an ebb and flow here that's way beyond your control. So going circling all the way back to the permaculture thing, you're just a caretaker. You're a little more than that, because maybe you're going to go cut the ground up and plant some stuff. But then you're just sort of, you're putting your hands up. What happens, happens. And you just grow. You grow as the garden grows, and you learn more, and it's just a fantastic experience. But when it comes to the soil, I would say if you're beginning, you're going to want minerals. You can get like volcanic ashes is really good. Right. And then you want the bacteria and the mushroom mycelium. And you could even maybe just do the mushroom mycelium, because if I'm not mistaken, that will attract the proper bacteria. And then that's it. Right.
So the added nutrients you was going on about, maybe not the ash. Would it be a great idea possibly, or to grow the mushrooms yourself and sort of add them as you go in?
Oh yeah, I plan. I mean, for one, they're very powerful mushrooms, and some of them are very delicious as well. So there's so many ways you can take it. The thing is like the soil amendment products you get and the mushroom mycelium ones can be quite expensive. You know, that a lot of mushrooms would have to be grown. So I would still use a soil amendment product if you're just beginning. I think it'll really take you to the next level. And this is the type of thing where like you're buying a bag, you put it in your garden and it's over. Like it's not a every week or every year. It's a one and done. When it's got it, it's got it. So it's worth doing. It's not some crazy expense that's going to be recurring. And then I also recommend growing mushrooms. I mentioned Paul Stamets earlier. He's done some amazing research to show how mushrooms can save the bees, the issues we're facing with the bees. And the mushroom, he witnessed the bees eating some of the mycelium of the mushroom. And then he started doing tests using mushroom extracts to treat these hives that were collapsing, you know, with all these beehives that are collapsing, and they had amazing results. Oh, wow. So, I mean, the mushrooms just play such an important role in the environment. And I mean, you can grow reishi mushroom, like one of the best herbs, most potent tonic herbs in the world. You can grow lion's mane mushroom, so amazing for the brain, and it's delicious. It's a gourmet mushroom. And you can even get kits to do this indoors if you're in an apartment and you can't, there is no garden. You know, for those listening, there's lots you can do, and the mushrooms are super powerful.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, the topic that I was really looking forward to, I think we've touched base pretty much. I had a little bit on soil here, but I think you've covered most of it, to be honest, which is great. So, but what I was really interested in was the topic of fermentation. Now, this one is something that I'm very, very intrigued in. I'm very, very interested in hearing your wisdom and knowledge on this, and something that I can't wait to try sometime this year, getting involved in. It's something that I see being part of my life, because how can I say it? I live in England, live in a seasonal lifestyle, diet with food. It's not easy. Like maybe I'm making it harder, possibly a little bit, but it's not very easy. Like, worst scenario situation, if you're someone who uses supermarkets, got nothing against them. Well, nothing against them. If you're someone who, 90% of the time you use supermarkets, and you're buying your foods from supermarkets, if you wanted to do a sweep and just sort of check where your foods are coming from, what country, organic, this, that, and the other, but mainly I'm in England. I'm trying to find foods that are from England. Probably, I'm just chucking a number out here, Jeff, but probably 80 to 90% of that food is not English or British, should I say. Like, it's not. We very much export.
Not even European, probably.
It's coming from all over the world. So
Yeah.
trying to have a balanced, seasonal relationship with food. And I'm sure it might be like this for many countries. I don't know, but for me, supermarket style, very difficult, very, 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 very difficult. So when I heard about fermentation and going into sync, obviously that's going into the cycles of how food's grown. And then I heard about fermentation, or a little bit more. We spoke about this a bit more, and I saw your video with Bobby Toombs, which just sparked up a lot of awareness in me and wanting to know a little bit more, hence why you're on the show today. Please let me shut up. What is
fermentation was how we preserved our food in the olden days, right? So the modern version of fermentation is pickling, and a pickled food has a similar flavor, excuse me, but it's just done in vinegar. There's no bacteria. It's dead. Whereas fermentation, you're using salt and water, and you create an environment that breeds bacteria. But these bacteria are excellent for your health, depending on the bacteria and depending on where you're at. It's something you might want to take slow at the start in terms of how much you eat daily. And it might cause some issues, because I know for me, like, I'd lost the weight, I'd gotten pretty healthy, and then I ran into ferments, and it kind of messed up my digestion for a bit. I would get these pains, but what I equated it to was like a war going on in my guts, and eventually the good guys won, and now my digestion's back to being great. I would say it's better than before. And my mood, my energy levels, these are much better than before. They've been taken to new heights with the fermented foods. I even got some here. So these are different peppers. You got the jalapenos, some orange, some red and yellow pepper. And then I got some horseradish root in there. And that's going to be a hot sauce. And that's super cool, because you just put it all into a blender, all the peppers. And it makes like if you have a really nice blender, which I don't, then you can literally make a hot sauce. Mine ends up being more like a salsa. But then you get all this brine, and this brine is filled with bacteria, and that brine could possibly be the answer to all of your digestion problems if you're someone who gets bloated a lot. And it's also a good tool for the times when you do want to eat some bread or cheat a little bit. Well, then you have a good shot of this brine before and after, fires up the acidity in the stomach to liquefy the food. And it has, it's full of all the electrolytes due to the salt. So it helps the colon do its peristalsis movement, where it moves the food down. So many benefits, but to ground it all out, it's all about fixing your gut health. And your gut health is, 70 to 80% of your immune system. It basically depends, like how you're feeling day to day, hour to hour, is very dependent on what's going on in your guts. We need B vitamins every single hour, and B vitamins have a lot to do with how we're feeling, whether you're feeling good, stuff like that. And we're not eating every hour, but your gut bacteria actually produce B vitamins. So, having a healthy gut health, having the proper bacteria is essential and a game changer. The only little, thing is, my perfect gut biome is not your perfect gut biome. Yeah. So it's, you've got to find what works for you. If you find that when you eat sauerkraut or you eat these properly fermented foods, it causes you a lot of pain, I wouldn't give up. I would just eat way less. I know I work with a nutritionist here in Calgary, and she's had people with I think it's called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Bacteria from the large intestine have grown into the small intestine.
Right.
And so something like sauerkraut can fix that or start that process, but it's going to be painful. Like the bacteria is going to fight back, and you're killing a part of you essentially to grow a new part. So she had to give this client literally a drop of the brine in a whole glass of water every day for a week, moving up to 2, 3, like insane. Like when you buy a probiotic, it's listed in CFU. It's just a type of unit. And a high quality probiotic is 50 billion per pill. That's super high quality. Most are like a couple 100,000 units per pill. Well, in an 8-ounce shot glass, I don't know about this brine, but in beet kvass, which is just the brine from when you do beets, was shown to have 8 trillion units of bacteria.
Whoa, okay, I'm doing this.
So like it's not even, so probiotics are super important, but going the pill route like is the only benefit of the pill route is you know exactly what bacteria it is, but a major downfall is they're dead. Like they're not dead, but they're dormant. And your immune system, in my opinion, is definitely, you know, shoot first, ask questions later. It's not going to wait for the bacteria to wake up to see if it's a good bacteria. It's just, okay, you're gone. Whereas when you drink the bacteria that's living and it's active, it's alive, your immune system can interact with it. Hey, I know what this is. Okay, on you go. Do what you're doing. So I think it's so important to actually make the fermented foods, and it's so easy. Like all I did for this, I mean, I cut up the peppers, took the seeds out, cut up some garlic and some horseradish, and threw it in there. And then you mix up some saltwater brine, and you don't use white salt. You got to use a good sea salt or the pink Himalayan salt, and that's it. And then you mix it up. You could look up the ratios.
I was going to say.
If you're happy to, yeah, I can. It's 2 tablespoons of salt per liter of water.
Per liter,
it's very
right.
salty. Yeah, 2 tablespoons per liter. The other way you can do that, because there's 2 types of ferments. There's this guy, which we call a brine, saltwater brine. Like I had to add a ton of water to this. Obviously, you know, peppers don't have that much water in it. And then the other method, pretty much the same thing, but when you do a proper sauerkraut, all the liquid in there is juice from the cabbage. I didn't add any water. So when you do the sauerkraut, I mean, a beautiful tool is one of them spiralizers. Such, if you have one of those or can get one, and then you spiralize the cabbage, or just shred it. Yeah, shred it as best you can, and then you massage the salt into it, and you use 1.75. Sorry, you use 1 tablespoon of salt for every 1.75 pounds of cabbage, and you can totally estimate. It's like if you do too much salt, it'll just slow down the process. And if you don't do enough salt, it'll be more susceptible to getting mold. But it's normal. Like even this guy's got the mold on top, or the cam yeasts, and it's just because there's not enough brine in there. That's fine. I'll pick those leaves out and carry on. The mold cannot penetrate in here because all your good bacteria will prevent that from happening. So that's cool too, right? It's like a visual representation. You've got the invaders up here, but they can't do it. Like this is an army of good bacteria. And that's how you want to treat your body. Like it's not about sanitization and killing all the bacteria. That's impossible. You need to just have the right ones.
Yeah.
You know, and just like with your teeth, like sugar doesn't cause cavities. You know, sugar feeds bacteria that eat your teeth.
Yeah, I've heard this.
Such an important piece of it. And I'm not saying, okay, now you can just eat a bunch of sugar, life's good, but it's such an important distinction to make, because here we are chasing cavities and tooth decay. You know, all this years you've been told about toothpaste and brushing your teeth, but no one ever tells you that, oh, if you just have the proper bacteria, this is not even a thing, not even a worry. Your teeth cannot get hurt, not even possible, unless you get hit or what have you. I'm sure there's other you know, pollution and toxins and what you're drinking, lots of acidic foods. You know, there's nothing's ever quite that simple. But, you know, it just totally changes your health game when you see you just have to load yourself up with the right army of bacteria. And, you know, there's, depending on the person, there's different bacteria you want. And I don't have that much knowledge. I know, like, you should look to, in your genetic line, going back 2 or 3 generations, where are you from? And what did those people eat for fermented foods? Because I'll tell you right now, every single pre-Western culture had a fermented food as a staple. You know, we're all familiar with kimchi, Korean kimchi. They ate kimchi with every single meal, some form of it. You can put so many different spices. Like when I say kimchi, you would thinking, oh, that must get old or taste the same. But it changes with the seasons. Depending on what vegetables in season, that's the vegetable you ferment, and then they last longer, and so on and so forth. And it's, like I said, you just need to find the veggies. You need a good jar. And now I've got these fancier little pickle pipes, we call them. So that lets gas out, but it doesn't let air in. But all you need is literally a paper towel or a cloth with a rubber band. You don't need anything fancy. You need a jar, and you need your vegetables and salt. That's all you need. You don't want to use, you can't use chlorinated water. Obviously, chlorine kills bacteria. It won't work. So you can't use tap water. Got to use filtered water. And funny enough, you can't really use fluoridated water either, because the fluoride is also antibacterial, can hurt them. So it's just kind of funny. I just laugh how, like, when you're getting into making these superfoods, you start realizing, well, wow, I can't use any of this stuff that we're told is all safe and effective and all good.
Yeah, and supposedly beneficial for us, and we'll kids going to bed with toothache.
Yet it kills the very bacteria that make you tick and help you run. So I definitely would experiment. Anyone watching, like, it's so easy, and then you shake it every day. I mark it on a calendar when I put it in. And if you go, like, the sauerkraut, you're waiting 6 weeks. That's a 6-week project.
That's
something. The peppers, this guy's a month, but for, say, like pickles, like turning cucumbers into pickles, like, that's only 4 to 6 days. So very quickly you can have this happening.
For some reason I thought it was longer, or if you wanted to leave it for longer, it just gets stronger. So
well, it totally depends on the vegetable. So something like a cucumber, if you go any longer than 6 or 7 days, it'll be mush. It'll be completely, there'll be no crisp texture there. The type of cucumber, that's where, like, pickling cucumbers come in, because they're firmer. They don't get as mushy. And then there's tips and tricks, like, to keep things crispier. You can use things like bay leaves or horseradish leaves. They're high tannin containing leaves, and they'll prevent it from getting mushy. But these are all just little tips and tricks that you learn. The beauty of it is, say you were to go and do the pickles, after 4 days, you would take a bite out of one. So you're not gambling. Every day you kind of taste one until it's perfect, and then it goes in the fridge. And since the fridge is cold, it halts the fermentation process. It doesn't completely stop it, but almost. So that's like putting it in a time lock, and then those bacteria just stay right where they're at the growth they're at. And I'm also, like, a quick note on, I don't use any starters. Some people say you got to use starters, like you got to get bacteria from the store to add into it to start it. Those will make it happen quicker, but they're not needed, and I don't like them. The way I've had it told to me, I don't know how scientific this is, but it sure makes sense, is that when they use the starter is like putting an adult bacteria in there, and it'll just breed more adults. Whereas when you start from this stage, you're getting the infant, the baby, teenager, adult. You've got this full spectrum of growth, and there's many benefits along the way. You want the whole spectrum. You don't just want the end product. You want that too, but it's wholeness. It's the whole thing. You want all of it. So I don't use starters. And then, I mean, there's so much, like I said, the brine is a digestion aid. It tastes amazing. You can put so many different herbs and spices. Keep it simple. The first ferments I started doing weren't the best because I was just getting a little too crazy with it, different spices. I find just plain and simple cabbage is good on its own, just with the salt and water. I eat garlic. A lot of people on the path aren't big fans of garlic, but I do, and it tastes great in the ferments. Same with onions. I only eat red onions, but they almost take on like a candied taste when you ferment them. Fermented garlic. Oh, this is another cool one. So you can use honey, like get a jar of unpasteurized raw honey, get a bunch of garlic, peel it down to the clove, stick it all in the honey, and make fermented honey. Takes about a month, and it'll taste literally like honey garlic sauce. Like, you know, when I used to eat a bunch of chicken wings, like just that amazing, you know, honey garlic flavor, but it'll be like a truly healing honey. Like a truly fermented garlic honey is unbelievable. Like for the throat, you feel anything coming on, you take that, it's over. And the garlic itself becomes very delicious. It loses almost all, like if you've ever had raw garlic or tried to take a piece, like it's like your eyes burn, it's not pleasant. But if you do the fermented garlic, it literally tones down the harshness and almost gives it like a bit of sweetness. So super cool. And like a big thing with our foods is like we call certain, like gluten, right? We call wheat bad, but if you have a good non-GMO wheat and you ferment it and the bacteria change the gluten into an easily digestible protein, then all of a sudden it's a good food. So sometimes we're calling bad foods bad, but we're just not preparing them properly. And even if we prepare them properly, that doesn't mean they're going to be perfect for you and your body type. You know, we're all very unique, but there's, you can ferment anything. You can do greens, kales. They only take a couple days, but so it's, there's so many avenues you can take it. And depending on the type of food you ferment, it'll breed different type of bacteria. So that's where this whole thing comes in of you got to choose the right ones for you. But I don't think you need to get caught up in like doing a ton of research or knowing exactly what's right. Just dive in and see what works. And especially someone like yourself, Zeke, like I don't know where you do get your food. If you sometimes do the supermarket or farmer's market or whatever you go to, you can you'll feel it out, see what jumps at you and what makes sense, and off you go.
Yeah, I do both. And yeah, totally. That's why the fermentation of food really resonated with me a lot, especially coming from the idea of not having a great amount of access to seasonal produce. Going where I can, if I could ferment stuff, and sort of that would outstretch, even in a 6-week period, that would make such a massive difference as to how I could eat and have beneficial food at the same time. You know, I could.
Yeah, and then it lasts forever. Like once it's done fermenting and you put it in the fridge, like it'll last a long time. And to give people some perspective, it's like, even if we back up like 50, 60 years here, like 1 or 2 generations, you know, they were different versions than today, but things like your relish, ketchup, mustard, salsa, all these condiments and sauces, these were all fermented foods. And now they're fake, completely sugar-filled, you know. And I eat some of those things like the ketchup. Again, I'm not perfect, not trying to make anyone feel bad, but sometimes you got to call it what it is, and they're garbage. They're not the best for you. And, you know, going this fermented route, it's totally helped me with my food and having better culinary experiences. Like through the week, I don't eat too much. For every day for lunch, you know, I eat twice a day, lunch and dinner, but my lunch is literally salad, but salad's a pretty strong word. It's literally just kale or whatever greens I can get, and cucumber, celery maybe. And then I throw on a bunch of sauerkraut, and I'll pour some of the brine in, and maybe some olive oil or pumpkin seed oil. And that's amazing. Like, it's high fat due to the oil, and it gives you lots of good sustained energy. And the brine, like this is like, you would treat this like a vinegar. So anywhere a recipe's calling for vinegar, especially like, oh man, like You mix, and you can get good raw mustard, and you put in a bit of this brine and whatever else you're into for spices, and you've got like an amazing salad dressing. Or even just the brine. Like to be honest with you, most days we don't have lots of time. Like when this is done and in the fridge, I just open it up, pour it into my salad, you know, ½ inch in the container, and throughout the day in my pack sack or as it's shaking, especially something like kale. Kale is not the best in a salad, but if it's been soaking in something acidic like a lemon juice or this brine, oh, it's all of a sudden it's more chewy and it just tastes good. And so it's really helped me out in the kitchen, the fermented foods, and just being more excited about your food and into it more.
Yeah, no, you touched base on the kale as well. There are some foods, particularly vegetables, that actually can be slightly beneficial. I don't know if maybe people moan with this, but that's fine. For example, like spinach, I tend to wilter my spinach, wilter down my spinach rather than have it raw more because it's better for your fiber and stuff like that. There's certain particulars like kale, for example, it's more digestible when it's slightly warmed up, if I'm correct. But,
yeah. It needs to be broken down a little bit somehow. It's such a dense vegetable.
Yeah, and I've seen it without grossing anyone out. I've seen it in my feces as well. Right? It hasn't broken down. Maybe that's digestion at the same time. But,
no, it's a strong plant. I mean, it's so hardy. And the biggest thing too with with cooking your food, I mean, there's so much here. Raw food is amazing. But everything in balance, a lot of the raw food vegan types, like a lot of them don't live in northern climates or have to go through a true winter, or, it's a different ball game.
Yeah.
And you really do got to eat for your location and eat for your season. And I know the biggest danger with raw food is mold and bugs. And there's lots of it, and in fact, it should have it. A good organic vegetable, there should be things that want to eat it.
Yeah.
But what's really important, what we do with all of our greens and salads is I soak them in a vinegar bath, vinegar and water. It's more water than vinegar, but a little bit of vinegar. Doesn't have to be good vinegar. It's just for cleaning, just a white vinegar. Or if you brew your own kombucha, every time you do a rebrew, you can save some of it in a vinegar. I put mine in a vinegar bottle because that's what'll happen. It'll just turn to a vinegar.
Yeah.
And you soak your veggies, and then you have another bowl there with more clean water, no vinegar, and then you rinse them off. And in that rinse, so they've been soaking in the vinegar 5-10 minutes, and then you do that dunk, and you look in the water, and you'll be surprised at what you see: little fruit flies and little bugs, and there's usually lots of it on there. And if there's too much, I mean, this is why I love it too. I get right into it, because if I do that and there's a ton of bugs, well, then guess what? I'm not going to buy that greens from that store anymore. I'll check in a few months later to see if it's any better. And then of course, once, I'd say in another 2 months, I won't have to buy any greens. It's one of the few things, like in your garden there, Zeke, if you take one row and you do what's called the microgreens, like it's where you put tons of seeds down, way too much than you would if you wanted the plant to actually grow the full size, kind of like sprouting. You put a ton down, and it can be a nice mix: lettuce, arugula, kale, whatever you're into, whatever resonates, spinach. And as soon as it's about 5 inches tall, you cut off 2 inches, and then it'll regrow, and you can do about 3 cuts. But in one row, and I think my row is 10 feet long or so, of the greens, like we couldn't keep up. Like we actually couldn't eat it quick enough. So greens is the one thing, with a small amount of land, you can actually really become pretty self-sufficient for the summer anyway. I'm not there yet for the winter, but small baby steps.
Yeah, for sure. And with the fermentation, sounds like you've got it coming nearly to a T. So, and there's so many little benefits that let's just read off of here, and then this is going off of fermentation again. So it'll be easier if I just read this out, and then you can touch base on anything that I've just spoken on. So it says here, Historically, the fermentation technique was used as a way of preserving foods and drinks long before the days of refrigeration. During the process of fermentation, microorganisms such as bacteria, yeast, or fungi convert organic compounds such as sugars and starch into alcohol or acids. For example, starches and sugars in vegetables and fruits are converted to lactic acid, and this lactic acid acts as a natural preservative. Fermentation can produce quite distinctive, strong, slight sour flavours. The consumption of foods and drinks that have undergone fermentation contain benefits to health that stretch beyond food preservation. The transformation of sugars and starches enhances the natural beneficial bacteria in food. These bacteria, known as probiotics or good bacteria, are thought to help a multitude of health issues, specifically digestive health, which is pretty much what you touch base on. All about the gut, isn't it?
Yeah.
The bacteria that live in our gut are essential. They help with digestion, absorption, and assimilation of nutrients. That's what I wanted to touch base on mostly there. Plus, they play a role in the function of our immune system. However, there are bad bacteria that also reside in the gut, and the challenge is achieving the right balance between the two. Pretty much what you just touched on. When the balance is shifted into favour of the bad bacteria, symptoms may arise such as bloating, constipation, or diarrhea. This is termed dysbiosis. Did I say that right?
Yeah, dysbiosis. Yeah.
Dysbiosis, sorry. Yeah. State in which the gut flora are out of balance. Modern diets, high in refined sugars, and busy, stressful lifestyles can contribute to dysbiosis by feeding the bad bacteria, enabling them to flourish. Eliminating refined, high-sugar foods and including probiotic-rich fermented foods is thought to bring the gut back into balance and support the immune system. Now, this is something that, again, I almost feel like I wouldn't say lied to. Yeah. This isn't really passed on as really sort of good information, if you want to call it that, sort of the act of fermented foods and then applying them to your diet as such. I've heard of so many types of diets. I've used sauerkraut, funny enough. You might have heard of her, Dr. Jennifer Daniels. So I started using some turpentine. I'm due to do it again, actually. But she recommended using fermented foods. Particularly, she said sauerkraut. And that was to balance out the gut, because obviously the turpentine was going to take a beating, and you take white sugar, and the die-off could be quite nasty, because you're killing off particular candida, etc. And then so she was saying to replenish the gut, sauerkraut was a good hit, or olives, something in brine, etc. So is there I don't know, have you heard much information on sort of applying fermentation into your diet? I mean, I've heard loads about fruits and veg and meat and dairy and, and having these wonderful, incredible types of diets to boost, etc. I haven't really heard that much. Maybe it's just me. I haven't really heard that much about fermentation and how beneficial it is to the...
Yeah, to me, when it comes to diets, whether you're a vegan or a carnivore or, pure meat eater, a big thing is, and you said it earlier, eating for your function. What do you want to experience? Because the foods will contribute to that. But regardless of what, diet or path you're on, the fermented foods, in my opinion, are a must. They're a staple in every single culture. And a big part of it is elimination. Whatever you're eating, it requires bacteria to break it down further, and of course your stomach acid. And what you don't use needs to come out of you. And the fermented foods are huge for that. They help carry stuff out. The brine is filled with electrolytes, which we talked about, good for elimination. And it is weird. It's interesting that it doesn't get talked about that much, when I think it's possibly the missing link for so many people. just due to, like that article was saying, how important the gut bacteria is. There's so many different roles. And if you've ever taken antibiotics, which so many of us have as kids, then there's damage there, and the probiotics can help that. And yeah, I've never really looked at it from that point of view, because you're right, we do hear so much about our food choices and the latest fad diets, but fermentation does get brushed under the rug, or doesn't get brushed under the rug, it just doesn't even really get brought up. And I've been lucky enough where I'm working now, we teach classes on it. It's a big part of the lifestyle at Light Cellar, and it's just showed me how important it is. And a great reference for people is Sandor Katz. That's Sandor, and then Katz, Sandor Katz. And he is like the father of fermentation, of modern fermentation. Like he's one of the people who's really brought it back. I feel like this is an area where we've really been removed. Like there's been a cut in the line from our ancestors, from our forefathers, this practice of fermenting food. And it's just so multifaceted. The health benefits, it's a way to connect with your food. You're getting your hands on it, rubbing the salt into it, you're shaking it, watching it every day. So your energy is completely molded and mingled into the food. And I think that's huge, like especially with your garden. Like I'm a firm believer that like you're out there with your plants and the energy's mingling, and the plants know what you need. They can feel it, or it's what they can't feel maybe, and then they can start adding more of that to their profile, and then you eat it. And it's the same with the fermented foods. These guys are feeling me and the bacteria that I need, and it'll brew more of those. And I know that can be too far-fetched for a lot of people, those ideas, but it makes sense to me. And the research speaks for itself. Yeah, the benefits are just so long listed, for sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that you have to be, like everything. It's all good research, and you've clearly done enough of that. But the action and the implementation that you've put in place, and obviously you're your own master in the making, because you're actually experiencing what's going on. So. And you're learning from it as well, and seeing what actually works for you. And then what an amazing touch, as you just shared on where you're working at the moment, you're able to actually teach people, which is just a beautiful bonus to be able to be in that sort of situation, to be able to pass on information like that. So I think that's fantastic. And yeah, just incredible work, Jeff. Just keep doing what you're doing, my friend. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much. And it is nice, each one teach one, and then we'll be in a much different world in no time.
Yeah.
And the food is just a great way to get into that sort of stuff. A lot of people, maybe they're not really into being healthier. They don't really care too much about the issues of the world, but everybody eats. So the fermented food is a good way to. This is how I medicate my whole family without them knowing, or pitch in. I always given people sauerkraut, and people love the taste and love how they feel. So you can see it in action, like instantly. And I find like people who desperately need it, they don't know they need it. I didn't tell them that they need it, because you got to be careful with stuff like that. It's got to be their idea. If you want the lasting change. But anyways, these people who really need it are the ones who just love it, can't get enough of it. It's one of the few things the body responds so well to it. It just tells you, give me more, give me more.
Amazing. I'm really, really excited. Like you've really put you've just hit the light switch on for me to really want to step it up, and it's so easy. That's the thing. So I've got no excuse really. So I'm this weekend for sure. I'll be up my local farmers market, and I think I'm going to just try with the regular sauerkraut and take it from there. I've got a jar waiting for me that's just been cleaned actually in my cupboard. So I'll have that ready and waiting to do my little sauerkraut mix and take it from there. So that being said, Jeff, I think, wow, what an amazing chat. What an amazing set of topics that we just touched base on. Definitely do a round two. And I'd love to know, mate, we'll have to catch up at some point and see how you're getting along, maybe in another quarter or so in the year, and see how you're getting along with your plants and with your work and just your general growth as a spiritual being. It's just amazing to share this space. And so glad I actually got you on the show. So thank you so much for being there.
Oh, you're very welcome, Zeke. It was a lot of fun. We touched on a lot of different things, so I think people will definitely have a few things to walk away with and to turn the gears on.
Amazing stuff. And yeah, that being said, this is the Need to Know Crosstalk show. I am Zeke Dorset with my guest, Jeff McKay, and we are out. Wholeness to you all. Thank you.
Cheers. Wholeness.